Hello once again, everyone, and welcome back to our second episode of Fights in History, or whatever the heck I called it. Anyway, joining me once again is Randy, who is my perpetual antagonist throughout the ages. Today we're going to be once again going over an account from Monstery, and probably the last one for a while, but this one has a little bit more specifics, because one, it takes place in a very interesting period of history, and two, it is in a dueling context, which is even more fun. So, this took place in the later 1800s, and this was when Monstery was actually part of the Mexican army. I don't know exactly which conflict this was, but I believe it is one of the wars in the Yucatan region, specifically the state of Chiapas. And either way, he got into a duel with an officer of the Mexican army named General Bragamonte. That will be played by Randy. Now, according to, and what makes this duel unique is that one, it has a lot of descriptor in the actual instance, and two, it actually showcases a very important movement that, frankly, if you're going to fight with any sort of sword, you should cultivate this ability. So, let's set the stage. Bragamonte has taken his position, and Monstery, played by me, is holding guard as always. The duel was with sabers, probably their service weapons, we don't know exactly. But, according to the account, Bragamonte is cutting rather wildly. Now, does this mean that he's acting like an ape? No. He is probably just using full shoulder cuts, etc. as he's coming in, right? Which prompts me to then defend myself relatively reserved. And according to the account, that's all Monstery does. In comes Bragamonte with serious attacks over and over again. Monstery keeps his cool and tries to keep his distance. Now, at some points, Bragamonte is reported to have even cut the ground. Now, what does this mean? It could mean that he is just cutting all the way through and happens to nick the ground, or it could alternatively mean that he's attempting to get Monstery to flinch, as cutting at the legs is kind of the first trick that any one-handed saberist learns. So, at one point during that, he's just kind of throwing these cuts at me, that sort of thing, right? Which occasionally wildly throws out at the ground, prompting that sort of action, right? I even thought I was going to get hit, which is why I flinched. Now, one of these cuts apparently actually hit Monstery's boot, and managed to wound his great toe. He didn't notice at the time, but that was there. So technically, first blood to Bragamonte. But, after a series of cuts, Bragamonte is going to feign exhaustion. Now, we don't exactly know what this looks like, but based upon the follow-up action, we're assuming that he's dropping his sword relatively close to the inside, probably keeping his tip at Monstery so as to prevent him from closing in, and opening up this side. Now, what is reported to have happened is Monstery is going to throw what I would call a two-cut, that being a cut coming down from my left with a small lunge targeting the wrist. And as he does this, up goes Bragamonte's guard. And at the same time, he's stepping forward with his back foot, grasping hold of Monstery's hand, and then seeking with control of the weapons to run him through. This is Bragamonte's trick. And actually a trick that Monstery encountered before when he was in South America, if you read his biography. It's quite cool. But here is that action for Bragamonte. Uh-oh. And it's very simultaneous. He baited me in. He's got all the time in the world to do it. But that's not how the duel ends. Instead, Monstery does something rather clever, which we will show. So what happened? This is where I get into that whole very important concept that you should know. Anytime someone tries to advance up onto you, regardless of what weapon, right? Even if we had two hands in the blade, the same thing still applies here. He is trying to get tight lateral motion. If I were to step backward off of this cover, yes, I can keep distance. The problem is, one, I'm making a guess as to how far away I can get and how far he's willing to go. Because if I step pure backwards, now he can just step forward with his right side again, and I have more to deal with, right? And furthermore, especially in regards to one hand, I will now have to be parrying in a rather weird way. Not that it's not doable, just that it's not ideal. Why give so much ground and risk things, right? Instead, the safest place is to go forward into this magical little zone that I call a pocket, right? So, right here, dangerous, right here, dangerous, right here, dangerous. Here's why. Because other situation, right? So, for example, I throw a cut, he catches it, sure. I have an opening there. As he's trying to step up, I could try and push the guard in. The problem here is that his non-dominant hand can control this whole zone. My non-dominant hand now has to reach a lot further, and because I had to step up, my right leg is now basically within his frame. This is not a good situation for me. that is his strongest grapple zone, so it's not safe. So, conversely, behind his right shoulder is the safest place for me to stand. The only thing he can do to protect himself is use his sword on that side. He can't reach across to grapple. It allows me to bring my grappling side up, and furthermore, it counters his action quite well because of some neat little things that happen. So let's go in super slow motion. So I throw my cut and he catches it. As he's stepping forward, right, the most important thing that I need to do is, number one, continue protecting myself, which fortunately this is a 2-tempo action, so I have time. Number two is to prevent him from grabbing my hand. Because if he gets a hold of my hand, my only choice now is to try and grab his as well. That makes it even again, but it's not ideal. Could I pull my hand back? Yes, and this would also lead into me stepping straight backwards, right? I could try and do that, right? And maybe I can even get my point online. We do see plays like that. Certainly with a leg void, I could maybe even achieve that at the same time. But it's not ideal because of where he's set up for. He could throw a cut, and we could end up with a double, possibly a worse double, given by the way he's cutting, right? So, this is kind of weird, but to actually pull back, I need to go forward. So I cut, he catches. As I step forward, naturally that allows my body to turn since I'm throwing that right leg forward, and I turn profile, which means my arm ends up going back, shielding me a lot better. At the same time, I grab hold of his wrist, and I have now reversed the trick on him. According to the account, Monstery then rammed his sword through Bragamonte to the point that the point was going out his back, and the hilt hit his breast. However, surprisingly enough, Bragamonte lived. No deaths in this duel. It was called after that. According to Monstery, Bragamonte never quite shone as a swordsman again, meaning probably either being shaken up or some internal injuries prevented him from fencing as he used to. But either way, a non-fatal ending to a pretty cool exchange. So let's go through the whole action one time, and then we'll be done. So, we'll go ahead and start a little bit over here since I got to kind of back up. They take their guards. Bragamonte's advancing with wild cuts, occasionally cutting the ground or things along those lines. Then at some point he feigns tiredness. I throw the cut, but I reverse the trick. And then we ram through. So overall, a really cool exchange. I certainly would have liked to see it happen, live, because it could surprise a lot of people, especially in the age of linear fencing, to be ready to do that. But either way, thank you very much, Randy. Hopefully we won't have you attack me too much more through history, but I'll get some other people in.
I'll get you one day.
Either way, though, thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And we'll go over some other fights another time.